As night falls, memories of horrifying experiences still lurk in the minds of former police officers. Horrifying images, strange sounds, and bone-chilling cold still haunt them in every dream. These stories are not just fragments of the past, they are indelible marks, reminding them that darkness exists not only in deserted streets, but also in the human soul. Always be vigilant, because fear can come from places you least expect. Story 1: A Policeman's Night of Terror. I worked as a police officer for 30 years and retired at the age of 50. During that time, I received many strange calls, but nothing could compare to that night. It was a scary night that I will never forget, with a call about domestic abuse from a neighbor. These types of calls are usually simple cases, don't cause much trouble, and usually just give us more work to do at night. However, from the beginning, something was wrong that night. When we arrived at the address, the front door of the house was wide open. As soon as we entered, a strong and disgusting scent filled our noses. Not only was there a strong smell of marijuana, but also a strong chemical smell, which appeared to be methamphetamine or cocaine. The whole space is full of unimaginable things. We called the couple in the house to come out, but there was no response. Noises from upstairs made us realize that their location might be there. My colleague Steve immediately put his hand on his holster and readied himself. I feel stressed, but not to the point of panic. Steve ordered me to move quietly up the stairs, and I obeyed, filled with anxiety and fear. On the second floor, there are 3 doors, 2 open and 1 closed. The closed door led to a room dimly lit from LED lights on the ceiling. I banged on the door before opening it. Immediately, the stench of a rotting corpse entered my nose. In the darkness, I could see the body clearly, even though it was only a blur. The creepy feeling made me feel like I was in a nightmare. Steve turned on the lights, and we immediately pulled out our guns. I told Steve to scan the room while I continued checking the rest of the house. My heart was pounding in my chest, my arms and legs were shaking. I felt as if I was about to collapse on the spot. I tried to stay calm as I grabbed the doorknob and turned it. When the door opened, I turned on the light and looked inside. It was a small room with no windows and no furniture, except for a dirty, dusty cot. Suddenly, from behind, Steve screamed in panic. I quickly ran towards him and saw a shirtless man lying on a dresser in the room. We immediately pointed our guns at him and asked him to get down. At that moment, a hand from under the bed suddenly grabbed my ankle, pulling me to the floor. I used my other foot to step on that arm and pulled out a woman who looked as if she had been burned, skinny and weak. She was handcuffed immediately, and Steve handcuffed the other man. We were about to leave the house with the 2 handcuffed people, but another shock came. A psychopath rushed down the stairs from upstairs with a knife in his hand, screaming wildly. Steve reacted promptly, shooting the guy dead before he could get close to us. The whole house was now a ghostly scene, with screams and flashing police lights. We couldn't believe our eyes when we discovered that none of the neighbors had noticed anything unusual. That night, we found out that the woman was killed by the man we had handcuffed because he couldn't pay. The killer was sentenced to life in prison without parole, while the woman was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Steve later said that he did not feel guilty about what he had done, but had simply removed yet another piece of trash in society. That night haunted me forever. The gruesome images, the stench of corpses, and the cold feeling of standing in that dark room will never fade from my memory. Every time I think about that night, I feel as if I'm still standing there, facing a darkness and horror that only those who have experienced it can understand. Story 2: A horrible night at the old office building. That night begins with a seemingly simple mission, but quickly turns into an unforgettable nightmare. A colleague on my team received an alert about suspicious movement from an old office building. This building has been converted into a doctor's office, with a pharmacy located adjacent. Our dispatch received a motion signal from an office on the second floor. We were assigned to the scene to secure the building, especially since the staircase was locked and the key holder was not present. We decided to use the elevator to get to the second floor. When the elevator doors opened, we entered a pitch-black hallway, lit only by a small, dim light hanging at the end of the hallway. The air in the hallway seemed thick, cold, and had an indescribable feeling of stuffiness. We began to carefully examine each door, finding that all the doors were locked and there were no signs of forced entry. When we reached the last office room, we checked and found that the door was unlocked. Stepping inside, we found it to be an unused office with a spacious waiting room and reception area. There were about 10 or 12 exam rooms, all of which were kept clean. Everything seemed normal until we decided to leave the office. As soon as we got back into the hallway, I noticed something was wrong. The light at the end of the hallway, which had gone out before, now lit up with a different light. I looked at my teammate and saw that he had turned completely white. I asked him if there was a problem, and he said that all the doors we had just checked were closed and locked. I looked around and saw that now all the offices at the end of the hallway we had just checked were open. Stress and anxiety increased. We decided to go back and check out each office again. When we finished the final office check and were about to exit the building, the main door suddenly slammed shut. Immediately, our radios began emitting strange static, as if something was trying to communicate with us from somewhere invisible. A feeling of confusion and fear spread throughout my body. We hurried back to the elevator and down to the first floor, hoping to contact the key holder again to report what we had encountered. However, the key holder seems to have disappeared. I contacted the dispatcher and asked for the key holder's phone number, but the dispatcher informed me that the key holder was still on the way and estimated the time would be 5 minutes. When I called back, the dispatcher said there was no way we could get to the key holder. She confirmed that the alarm company had only contacted one person, and that person was not the person we met. Finally, the real key holder arrived on the scene. I asked her about the man who led us into the building. She asked me to describe him, and when I did, she became tense and panicked. She said my description sounded like one of the doctors who used to rent offices on the second floor. She went on to say that the doctor had committed suicide at his summer home just a few days before. Her words were like an electric shock, making my entire body tremble. The overwhelming cold and haunting feeling made me feel as if I was standing in the middle of a nightmare. Even as we left the building, the gruesome images and feelings haunted me. Every step, every little sound makes me feel like I can never escape the ghost of that building. The whispers and static from the walkie-talkies, along with images of offices opening automatically, will forever be part of the never-ending nightmare in my memory. Story 3: Scary encounter in abandoned building. When I received a call from a village resident reporting a possible trespass at one of the abandoned buildings across the street, I immediately responded. That building used to be a 2-story convenience store, now abandoned and with no signs of business activity. I arrived at the scene and began a thorough inspection. Stepping inside, I found the building completely empty, except for the remains of the old store, such as counters and shelves. The dim light from light bulbs that have not worked for a long time makes the space gloomy and dark. I started checking every small passage, checking every room and corner of the ground floor, finding no signs of intrusion. The feeling of cold and silence increased the insecurity in my heart. After completing my inspection of the ground floor, I went up to the second floor to continue my search. The upstairs was no different from the downstairs, completely empty, with parts of the old store lying haphazardly. The feeling of anxiety began to increase, but I continued to check every corner, open every door and peer into every hidden corner. Even though I checked very carefully, there were no signs of intrusion or anyone hiding. When I got back to my car, I looked back at the building again. In that moment, I saw a terrifying image at the window on the second floor. There was a woman with long white hair past her shoulders, standing looking down at me. Her smile was bright but carried a terrifying sneer. The cold feeling down my spine made me rush back into the building and upstairs in less than 10 seconds. However, when I reached the second floor, that window had become empty, with no trace of the strange woman left. I decided to re-examine the entire area, going through the 3 main passages and all the rooms. I checked behind the counter, the bathroom, and every little corner of the building, but couldn't find anyone. However, the feeling of anxiety and insecurity did not subside. I decided to leave the building, thinking that maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But as soon as I turned back to look towards the window, the woman appeared again, with that creepy sneer on her face. This time I couldn't take it anymore and went back into the building, running around the 3 aisles again, looking for the strange woman. As I was about to give up and leave, I suddenly noticed an unusual presence in my peripheral vision. It was a black shadow on the ceiling. Its shape was strange, like a hook. I shined my flashlight on the ceiling and immediately saw the woman. She was still standing there with a crazy and terrible smile, while using her hands to hold on to 2 hook-like objects attached to the ceiling. She stretched her legs up, forming a strange and unnatural position, as if she were using them for balance. She moved back and forth, like a weirdo, with each step slow and mocking. I don't know if she's mentally disabled or not, but her presence doesn't bring any sense of comfort. She was just toying with me in a weird way, brutally mirroring my entire trip through the window. A feeling of suspense and horror clung to me as I quickly left the building, unable to forget the terrifying image of that woman, and the sound of strange footsteps still echoed in my mind. Story 4: Horrifying situation in Floyd County. During my many years serving in Floyd County, Georgia, I have experienced many horrifying situations. But there was one quiet night that I will never forget because it brought about the deepest fear I have ever experienced. That night, I was patrolling a deserted dirt road in my cruiser. This road is located between small forests, creating a desolate and lonely landscape. Everything seemed peaceful until I saw a figure rushing into the woods on the left side of the road. I could only see half of their forms before they disappeared into the darkness. Curiosity and a feeling of anxiety motivated me to pull closer and shine my light into the forest. However, when the light shined in, I couldn't detect who was hiding in there. It was my duty to check unusual situations like this, so I took a deep breath, decided to leave the car, and started searching in the dense darkness. My heart was pounding as I began to explore the area, and my sense of dread increased. Suddenly, the hollow sound of a branch breaking from behind a nearby tree startled me. I wanted to immediately get back in the car and leave, but reason and duty kept me going. I shouted for that person to come out of hiding. Out of the darkness, a masked man stepped out from behind the tree. I ordered him to raise his hands and take off his mask, but he just stood there, raising his hands without complying with my request. I increased my tone, ordering him to take off his mask immediately. He seemed about to comply when suddenly his gaze shifted to the left and then back to me. At that moment, I heard footsteps coming from my right. My heart seethed with anxiety as I pulled out my gun and yelled for everyone to walk out with their hands up. Regardless of what you think about this, the situation becomes even more creepy when another person wearing a mask walks up. He was holding an axe, and I couldn't help but point the gun at him. But what was worse was that footsteps began to echo from all directions around me. I turned around and realized I was surrounded. At least 10 strangers, all wearing masks, surrounded me in a tight circle. Half of them carried axes. I stood in the middle of the siege, holding my gun but unable to aim at any specific target. Feelings of fear and helplessness overwhelmed me, and I felt like I was on the brink of death. Amid the tense silence, a deep, muffled voice said from one of the group, "Go away." These words came as a shock, making my heart drop. I knew I had to act immediately if I didn't want to die here. I turned and ran toward the car, speeding down the dirt road, calling for backup over the radio as I sped away. When the search team arrived at the scene, the mysterious group had already left the forest. After that event, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of anxiety. I believe that what I witnessed may have been a secret organization planning to trap innocent people. I think the first person who jumped into the woods recognized my car as a police car and tried to hide. If it weren't for me, they probably would have stopped me and put me in the hands of this group, doing things I couldn't imagine. Terror and anxiety continued to haunt me for many nights afterward. The feeling of the footsteps around me, the faces hiding behind masks, and the cold silence of the night have become an unforgettable part of my memory. As night falls, memories of horrifying experiences still lurk in the minds of former police officers. Horrifying images, strange sounds, and bone-chilling cold still haunt them in every dream. These stories are not just fragments of the past, they are indelible marks, reminding them that darkness exists not only in deserted streets, but also in the human soul. Always be vigilant, because fear can come from places you least expect.